Good morning, everybody. Just about. Sorry, we're a little bit delayed. I'm delighted now to introduce Tony Davis to the stage. Just one last final bit of housekeeping. We've got 62 in the hall, so just a bit of an observation. We should really only have about 55, but we'll kind of have to go with it at the moment. The session is really interactive, so please do make sure that ideally you do move to the second floor, as I asked a little earlier, where you'll be able to do some group work around the tables with Tony as the session progresses. And again, that's ideally done on tables of approximately four. So here is the man himself. A great pleasure to welcome Tony, and a huge thanks as well for participating in the conference today.
Thanks ever so much, Mark. It's a huge pleasure to be with you here again today, and thanks so much for inviting me to be part of the conference. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this wonderful DigiLounge world. I've been really looking forward to using this platform for a while now. Now, as you know, I can't pick up any visual or audio cues from you this morning, but I can see your reaction symbols, you know, the thumbs up and clap hands. So do please litter the presentation with those because it's really important that I'm getting some feedback. In fact, can I start with a bit of a Zen experience opening? Can I ask you all to give me a round of applause, please, just so I can see that we've got people in the room and that I'm not feeling like I'm here by myself. I'm seeing loads of hands going up now. Bottom right-hand corner, just hit that applause symbol. Fantastic. Thank you very much. A wonderful way to start the session. Okay, I'm going to start off with a bit of an enigmatic opening, and I'd like a thumbs up to this one, please, if you recognize this image. Does this take you anywhere back in time to your childhood or your children, with your children? Do anybody recognize that? Give us a thumbs up, please, and that you know, your little reaction buttons down at the bottom. Okay, I can see one or two, but there's not many reactions there. That's interesting. So this is the first image. What about this image? Does anybody recognize this second image? Well, the interesting way we're going to move on today is I've found a really neat way of combining the two. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time this session experimenting with this combination. So I hope you're ready and willing to have a little fun during the session this morning with me. It's worth saying right at the start that this session centers on game-based learning. Often games are just used to check what's being learned, but with game-based learning, the learning comes through the playing of a series of games. And this will take place in the breakout rooms in groups of four. On these tables in the DigiLounge after about half an hour of some important scene setting from me. So I hope you're up for both enjoying the session by participating in the games, but also looking pedagogically at the use of game-based learning to see whether that inspires you to think about using that strategy yourself, if indeed you're not using it already. So I'm a great believer, if we get going now, I'm a great believer in cause and effect. That's why I'm really not a fan of the phrase learning and teaching. Now, I'm not sure what phrase you use in your own colleges. It tends to be a very HE sort of phrase, but some colleges do use the phrase learning and teaching. I much prefer the phrase teaching and learning, cause and effect. Teaching, learning, cause and effect. It's about respecting the art that teaching is and the impact that we make on learning. And if I'm being really pedantic, I don't like the phrase teaching, learning, and assessment either. Part of what I do for a living is evaluate the difference that teaching and assessment make to learning. So should the acronym not be TLA but TAL? You might think this is something and nothing, but actually if we scratch at this A, we can start to see where all the issues are and what goes wrong with assessment when we're actually in the classroom watching or in the classroom doing. So to get under the skin of this issue and really set the tone for where we're going to go over this next couple of hours, I'd like you to write a quick definition of assessment, please. Can you define assessment and just stick your definition in the chat? Thank you. They're coming in now. Thank you, Emma Jane. We're off and running. A few more, please. commit to it. And even if you don't type it into the chat, what is your definition of assessment? Checking learning has taken place, checking evidence of learning and evaluating progress with the students, evaluation of skills and knowledge. Thank you ever so much, Bernadette and Mel, excellent, and Simon, the analysis of the depth of learning, getting some extra adjectives thrown in here. A way of evaluating the impact of learning, ensuring that students can meet the expectations of objectives. What I wanted you to do, and I'm not going to do obviously a full plenary with 60 odd comments, but what I wanted you to do was to commit to a definition of assessment. Though be prepared, there's a bit of a twist coming up here. Now, let's have a look at the definition that Webster's use. The action or instance of making a judgment about something. Now, that's pretty much what people have been saying in the chat there. What assessment does is it says where a learner is now. Though actually, asking you to define assessment was a bit of a trick question, because when we're talking about education, we really need to say the type of assessment that we're trying to define. In education terms, Webster's definition of assessment is summative assessment. Well, let's use its more common acronym, just exam. Just let's stick that in there, because something really interesting happens when you use the acronym. You use the synonym exam instead of tell that I talked about earlier, teaching assessment and its impact on learning. It becomes tell. Now, this, you might think this is something and nothing, but I just love the serendipity of an acronym when we're talking about pedagogy that refers to telling. So many teachers, it seems, and again, I'm not talking about any of your work, but so many teachers, it seems, they feel that telling and testing is the best way to teach. Telling and testing, telling and test. Tell them something, test they can regurgitate it. In fact, I have a rude word for that, rude phrase for that testing element. It's, can you remember what I've just damn well told you? We teach them something. Can you remember what I've just damn well told you? Just keep that ringing in your phrase. And when you're looking at your own teaching and seeing if that's what we're doing, simply testing recall. Because in Bloom's taxonomy terms, recall is way down here. It was really interesting to hear and see Jeff's ladder starting down here and ending up there. So summative assessment isn't really what we're wanting. And it was lovely to see some of Jeff's examples for this. Of course, this is what we're wanting, FA. And what does FA stand for? Well, there might be a bit of serendipity there too, but let's just move on quickly from that. So what is formative assessment? And how is it different to summative assessment? This is why it was important to get you to commit to our definition, whether you popped it in the chat or not, that didn't really matter, to commit to the definition. And then now, can I ask you to decide, was your definition summative or was it formative? In fact, can I ask you, just above in the chat again, please, how you'd make, what's the difference? How would you turn your the definition of summative into one about formative assessment? What is the difference? So let me just pause and look at the chat, please. What's the difference? What makes it formative? So it's that anxious time when you can't see heads, you can't see whether people are typing or not, but I've just given it a few more seconds for you to bob something in there. What makes it formative? Thank you, Paul, that's brilliant. Formative is about gauging a student's stage of learning development, ongoing assessment as learners progress through the phases, continual assessment in fluid line with teaching, formative assessment in the moment, analysing the learning in progress, summative, conclusive review of learning. So learning in the moment, I like that phrase. Thanks, Simon. Formative is practice, summative is understanding. Formative is the moment it takes into account change, adjustments, learning over time. Summative is capturing what they've learned. So thank you very much for that, Mel. Have you all committed in your own minds, at least, if not in the chat, what formative is, what makes it different? This is a really lovely addition to the word formative to give a really healthy clue of what formative assessment is. If you stick in front of it and turn it into informative assessment, for it to be formative, it has to inform the next step. So strategies that show how a learner has changed, that's the summative bit, that's where a learner is now, and what they need to do next. The blue bit is the really important bit, the summative assessment. Something has to happen as a result of the assessment for it to be formative. And what we see time and again are teachers thinking that they're doing formative assessment, but they're actually doing serial summative assessment. They're doing summative over and over again, but that doesn't make it formative, just the frequency. It has to be something different. It has to produce a next step, this blue text. A typical example we see is the use of a Kahoot quiz. In fact, I've been back these last 3 weeks. It's been heaven. I've been back in colleges in the back of people's classes, and it's been an absolute fantastic blast watching people at work. But we see things like the Kahoot quiz, and there's a load of different versions of that now, of course, used at the end of a session. A learner might score, or learners might score, let's say 7 out of 10 or whatever. And there's a big cheer. Yeah, fantastic. We'll see you next week. Brilliant stuff. Now, it is fun, and so there's value just in that fun element. But if nothing is done about the 3, then it's summative. And the only place for summative assessment really is just before the learner walks out of the door at the end of the course, or just before the end of a formal unit of a study that they're not going to come back to. Every other time, it has to be formative assessment, assessment for learning, assessment that produces learning. It's not teaching, learning, and then seeing what you can damn well remember. It's teaching and assessment producing an impact on learning. Can I just pause a minute though and ask you what you might think is a bit of a tangential question? Do you want your learners to be intrinsically motivated, self-motivated to be able to learn independently? Or do you want to have to be the constant fuel for their motivation? Do you want to have to continually extrinsically motivate them so that they're dependent on you? So again, just bob your answer in the chat, please. Do you want them to be, your learners to be independent or dependent? It's a really profound question because there's some big impacts on your assessment practice when you make this decision. So stick in the chat, please. Independent or dependent? Which is it you're trying to produce here? Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Mel. It's one of those obvious questions that you're thinking, of course it's independent. But actually, because of time, it's normally a 3.5-hour session this time. So I'm boxing clever and making sure to cut out some of the stuff I normally would. But I actually normally do a review of Ofsted findings on assessment and how Ofsted is critical of our assessment practice, teachers' assessment practice. If I've got a minute at the end, I have a slide that's buried in the corner of my presentation, and I'll show you what they write all of the time. And you can then make your decision about whether pedagogically they're on the right track or not. But of course it's dependent. We need to produce learners who are independent of us. If we create dependency, then we're just loading up on all sorts of problems for us ourselves. So that's the challenge today. You'll see where I'm going to go with this intrinsically motivated element, because of course we want learners to be able to do it for themselves, be fueled from the inside, not constantly fueled by us. That's too draining for teachers. We need an easier life than that. So our challenge today then is to look at 50 shades of, click the right button, assessment. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to do it through gamification. We're going to look at 50 different ways of assessing learners. But before I get stuck in, I just want to, I mentioned earlier on that some teachers have a very small toolkit for actually talking about assessment, and they really just look at recall and asking Q&A. And so I just want to share a very typical lesson plan. I collect lesson plans all of the time. And this is just a very typical example. I analyze how the learning outcomes were written, how the assessment criteria strategies were written, and how the differentiation strategies were written as well. Just have a look at the sort of things we see over and over again. So here's the starter activity and the assessment strategy, direct and indirect questioning. So we've got the mid-plenary, the assessment strategy, direct and indirect questioning, the main learning workshop, what the room, questioning, check work, and the bottom down here, direct questioning for the plenary at the end. It's like there's just a poor vocabulary around assessment, a limited bag of tricks, and it leads to teachers having to work too hard, and it creates dependency on us. And I feel like my session's really building on the sort of stuff that Jeff was talking about in his session this morning. So as I mentioned, I'm going to share with you 50 different learner-centered formative assessment strategies. But if that's starting to sound like a lot of work, then let me just give you the rubric. They're not about general questioning techniques. They're not about giving feedback, and they're not about you marking yet more learners' work. Hence the title of the session, Assessment and the Art of Lazy Teaching. The only investment you'll have to make is to practice using them, even if it's just one. Imagine, change one thing, make your life easier. What one thing would you love to resolve? Just find one of these 50 that you think that's a golden ticket for me, and change that one thing, make your life easier. The strategies aren't about working harder. They're about intrinsically motivating learners to work smarter, to assess their own work, and ultimately to hand in better quality work that makes your marking tasks, your formal marking tasks, much easier, quicker, and more enjoyable. So we've got our sort of scene set, but it's time for the games. So can I just have you give me a quick thumbs up? Use that reactions button down in your bottom right hand corner, and just give it a thumbs up if you've played Top Trumps before. Anybody played Top Trumps before, please? Just hit that thumbs up button. Now I'm not seeing any thumbs. I can't believe that that people haven't played before. So I'm just hoping that thumbs up's working. Just give us a smiley face or a hand clap if you played Top Trumps before. I hope this feedback mechanism's working. Okay, so I've got someone saying yes, it is, lots of thumbs. I can't see them. Okay, so I'm not going to get worried now because I can't see any thumbs going up there, but I'm delighted that you have played it before. The reason I love Top Trumps as an educational games format is that it requires learners to evaluate. You remember when I said that, you know, Kahoot can be right down here if it's used inappropriate, just checking learning. Well, think about you've got knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. And Top Trumps requires you to evaluate. So it's a brilliant game format for producing the learning, not simply checking it. So don't worry if you haven't played before. It's easy, and the rules will be on screen all of the time for you to play. So you have a pack of cards, all of which are unique, like this one here from Eleanor Dashwood, and it's from the pack called Sense and Sensibility. And if I zoom in a little bit on this card, you can start to see some things about it. There's an image. There aren't images on mine, but that's okay. There's some text, and then there's a set of common criteria. Now, again, I'm going to be wanting you to hit up the chat in a second with some answers here, because there's a few things you have to understand about the game format and why it makes you evaluate so deeply. So let's have a look at this card. I'll zoom in a bit more and we can read it together. Mr. and Mrs. Dashwood's elder daughter and heroine of the novel. Eleanor is poised yet affectionate, which is particularly evident when calming and encouraging her more vulnerable younger sister, Marianne. So now we know a little bit about Eleanor. We've got to judge which of these scores might win, because these wealth, wit, influence, and attractions categories are the same on other characters' cards, but the scores will be different. So which is the highest score on this card? Now you might think it's 70, but is it? Because they're all out of different amounts. We don't know what the top score is of each of these categories. So I'm going to ask you for attraction first. Can you please pop in the chat what you think the top score is for attraction? What do you think 70 is out of? Just bob that in there, please. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Paul. And of course, that's what people jump to immediately. So let's have a look at what you're saying by saying 100. That Eleanor is, you know, she's okay, she's fine, she's moderately attractive. But actually, it might be out of 70. It might be out of 73. We've got to make a judgment. So let's do that again. You've just heard in the chat here, in the card description, she was very good at calming and encouraging her more vulnerable younger sister. So what do you reckon 15 is out of? Influence. What do you think the top score in the pack is for influence? If Eleanor's scoring 15, you bob an answer to that one in there. Yeah, so you write down now, you're saying 15 is a high score. So we might think 70 was the biggest number, well it is, but actually the winning score might be 15. Can you see you've had to evaluate because all of them are out of a different amount. Wealth might be out of 5 and it might be out of 3. It might be out of 50 because if she's quite poor, then you can see 50 would really show what her wealth status was. We can't know. We have to make an educated guess. That's why I love the Top Trumps format for education. So here's my version of the Top Trumps game. It's the 50 Shades of Assessment. And you can see the format is very similar, but there are differences. There's no pictures, but there is a unique title and there's a unique card number. Let me just zoom in on that bottom number there. You can see this is card number 3. And of course, it's called Mobile Phone Documentaries. Now, can I just pop that card to one side and ask you just a rhetorical question? Does that title pique your curiosity? Mobile phone documentaries, do you currently use that strategy in your own teaching? Do you think, I'd like to know a little bit more about that? This is a very particular instant reaction that you're having to the card. If you think, I'd like to know a bit more about that, then just hang on to that feeling when I get to Rule 8 in a few moments. Anyway, back to the card. You've got a description of how to run that strategy. You've got black text and blue text. I want you to be thinking about what that blue text is. And this strategy has this amount of impact on the development of the common criteria, the common evaluative statements, which in this instance are expert learning traits. So have a look at the scores here. They go from 15 up to 132. But we already know that 132 might not be the winning score. If this strategy is all about note-taking and reflection, note-taking and writing, for instance, then we know 17 might well be the winning score. You have to read the card and decide which the category is that's going to win when you're battling with your mates. So let's have a look at the expert learning traits scores here. And it's lovely to hear Richard Bainham talk about the skills that Ofsted are going to be looking for. Who cares whether Ofsted are looking for it or not? What FE is about is creating this. This is it. So it's lovely that Ofsted are looking at it too, but they're only voyeurs are Ofsted. I say this as a long-time Ofsted inspector. Curiosity and love for the subject. Would you love your learners to be curious and really enjoy all of the aspects of your subject? So which cards are going to score the highest on this, such that you think, if I want my learners to be more curious, you're going to look for high scores on curiosity. So is this strategy the one to really make your learners curious? What about risk-taking and stamina at 120? We don't know yet whether that's a high score or not, but do you want to increase your learners' willingness to take risks and their stamina to keep going when it goes wrong? So this could be a good card for that. We'll have to make a decision. Personal learning management, active listening and asking questions, evaluating others' work, research and reading, note-taking and writing, creativity and problem-solving, collaborative learning. And I've got a wiki running on my website. I'll see if I can bob a link in the chat later on. That's really got a granular description of each one of these specific skills and attitudes that we want our learners to have. It's not just skills. The attitudes are actually more important than the skills. If you don't get the attitude right, you won't get them learning the skills. But you can see here, we've distilled it to this bunch here. I think there's 9, is it, that we've got as our main common criteria. So let's just look at the card again. This strategy has this much impact on all of these traits. You've got to decide which is the winning score and then battle against your mates with that winning score. So I'm going to show you a few little bits. I'm going to let you read the rules together when you actually get into your tables and just read. There's only 12 rules. In fact, that's more than actually you need. It's 1 to 10 that's really important. Read the rules together. I just want to focus on 2 of them, because if you play this Top Trump game like you do normally, you'll not quite play it right because of rule number 4. So imagine I'm on and I've got John, Lucy and Gerard in my table. I'm on, so I'll say my card is mobile phone documentaries. Gerard, what's yours? John, what's yours? Lucy, what's yours? So I want to drive it if I'm on. Do please drive the pace of the game. Otherwise, it can if you're too collegiate about it, it just won't spark as much. The person who's on needs to hear everybody's titles. So you're gaining a bit of competitive advantage here because you're thinking, well, this is my title, they're their titles. I think this is going to be the winning card. The other thing, though, is you all hear the 4 titles. And you remember what I said about piquing your curiosity? If you hear meerkat moments or itch your arm if you don't understand, and you think, I want to know more about that one, then just say, hang on a minute, let me just write that title down. What was the card number? Because that's rule 8. It's why you're playing this game. If you have a reaction to the title, even the title, stick the number and the title of the card on your page 1 of your handout. I'm hoping you've all got page 1 of the handout. It's a really central part of what we're working on today. If you haven't, grab a piece of paper, draw 3 columns, number, title, notes. The importance of the notes column is that some of these strategies might be magical every single lesson, and you think this is going to become one of my stalwart assessment strategies. Or it might be that you've got a strategy that might work for 1 lesson a year. It'll be blinding for that 1 lesson a year. Say it's prevent, you're going to do your prevent training, notwithstanding Richard's point about keeping that going. I'm not sure he understands perhaps the implications to your time to keep that sort of thing going. But anyway, that's another story. Title, number, notes. Why did you collect it? And I'd like you to collect at least 5 from this first game. And then that will set you up beautifully for the next game. Just a few last things before I show you the deck of cards. Winner doesn't stay on. Everyone take it in turns. Normally we'd say go clockwise, but of course online that might not quite work just as it would in real life. So I'm now going to take you to the game, and then I'm going to ask you to click the link and open the deck of cards for yourself. So this is the resource page for today's session. Hopefully you all had this in your joining instructions. I know your crew were sent specific joining instructions for today's session. So I'm now going to share my screen and just nip onto my website. So I can now see that the screen's been shared, and you can see here we've got assessment and the Art Lazy Teaching card deck for game 1. I'll zoom in a little bit here, and when I click that link, it takes me to this page here. I'll just zoom out a bit so you can see the whole page. Okay. Now, if we were playing this physically, I don't know if you can still see me, we'd have packs of cards, but of course online we can't do that. So I get the computer to deal you 7 cards from the whole pack. You can see there are 7 because if you go down to this bottom corner here, let me just zoom in again, right down at the bottom, you can see these spots. As you change the spots, you advance your cards. You can also advance your cards by using the green arrows that's at the side. You can go forwards or backwards, though you probably just want to go forwards. And I'd like you to play for 20 minutes for this first game. So I'm hoping you'll get through at least 2 full games. That's there's 7 cards in each round, and get through 2 rounds. So how do you deal a second set of cards? Well, if you look at rule 11 down here, to play another game, you just hit F5 on your keyboard. If I'll do that now, you can see instead of whole class debate, I've now got Hunt the Issues as card number 1. If you haven't got F5 on your keyboard pad, then go up to the top left-hand corner. You can just about see my mouse up there, top left-hand corner, that circular arrow, that's your refresh button. And if I refresh, you can see it's dealt me another 7 cards. And that's it. You just all have your card, read it through. Whoever's on asks for the titles of the cards, checks what they've heard against what they think they're good at, their card is good at, and chooses a winning score. John, what's your score? Lucy, what's your score? Simon, what's your score? Damn, Simon's won. Now then, this is the bit that I want you to really hang on to and remember. It's in the rules, but let me just say it now. You have to now share your screen and maximize it. So I've got some buttons to show you for that in a second, but just before I do, let me grab the link to that game. I'm going to stop my screen share. I'm going to go to the chat and pop that link directly to the game in the chat and show you these buttons. There's a couple of things you need to do when you're on the tables. The first is you need to click tile view so that you're all nice and big on your screen. So you can see 4 colleagues all nice and big. When you win, you need to hit the share button so that because you're going to read out the winning card, and you need to maximize your screen. That's up in the top right hand corner. Tile view, share, maximize when you won. Obviously tile view all of the time. Okay, so that's the game. They're the rules, and I think that's me done. So can I ask you now all to click on that link, and you're going to have the DigiLounge open in one window, and you're going to have the game page open in another. The screen share didn't work. We'll get to your table. Oh yeah, yeah. And so you have to get to the tables, I think, before we can give you all the screen share options and this button. But can I just ask you to, in fact, Bev, can you and Mark, can you just monitor this, because I'm not seeing the thumbs up on my screen for some reason. Can you all click on that link, please, and just give us a thumbs up that you've managed to get into the page okay? So when Bev sends us back to the floor, just click on a table. We want you in groups of 4, please. So you can see there's 6 seats at a table. Don't fill a table up, just get in groups of 4, and then we'll be good to go. And I'll be setting my timer for 20 minutes, and I'll be running in and out of all of the rooms, checking on any technical issues, as will Bev. And hopefully Mark will be helping as well. So lots of thumbs up from Bev. That's brilliant. Going to struggle to participate as I'm teaching whilst watching Simon. That's amazing. I once had a delegate driving in Saudi Arabia on her phone and participating in a session. It just, the mind boggles. I did advise her to park or just stop, but there you go. Okay, I'm going to open now. The time is 11:42. We've got 20 minutes for this first game. And as I said before, that'll set us up nicely for the following 2 games, because there's a lot of space, there's a lot of distance to travel in this whole thing. Any quick questions, please, in the chat now before I ask Bev to send us all to the floor and get cracking with the game.
All right, everyone, just a quick instruction. If you have any more questions, please put them on the chat now. We will be with you to help you into your table. And as Tony advised on, you need to have the other browser open. So we'll bring you onto the table mode now. And I believe we're doing this session on 2nd floor. It will be on the left side of your screen. Click 2 and then group yourself into 4s and we can start. Shall we move to the table now, Tony?
Yes, thanks, Bev. Okay, we'll see you all in there. Cheers.